welcome to Anything Goes. I'm your 5 Wing 4 host, Madison.
And I'm your 9 Wing 1 host, Caden.
And this is a podcast about the Enneagram. Yeah.
So disclaimers, we are pre-recording all of our episodes for a few months because Maddie has something to do. We are not safe for work, so God damn it, I'm eating pita bread right now. I'm sorry. My articulation is not on point. As exemplified by that last sentence where I swore, not safe for work. Please put headphones in if you feel uncomfortable with that, I guess. And also, we're gay, so please leave if you feel uncomfortable with that. We're not trained in the Enneagram, but if you give us $600, Maddie will join a cult. So, how am I doing?
Pretty great. Okay. I will add that the date we're recording this is April 10th, the same day we recorded our last episode. So if you emailed us or answered us and you're not featured, I deeply apologize.
We only hate you if you're one because you're mean to Maddie. I'm also just kidding.
There was a one that was very mean to me. And I will discuss them and roast them on the internet now. Also, we do have a Patreon. The link will be in our description and show notes. So if you would like to give us money, that would be great. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. So this episode we are discussing the Harmonics Triad, and specifically working with the Competency group, which is type 1, 3, and 5. So our question was for the Competency group. And we asked, do you think you'd survive the zombie apocalypse? So I got some answers. The only answer I got from a type 1, they were mean to me. I'm sensitive. Pleatort. I'm calling you out. Pleteurt was mean to me. Quote, I will never understand people who actually like thinking about shit like this, and I'm very high in openness. So to answer your question, who cares? It's not an interesting hypothetical in the slightest. And I'm just going to go ahead and call it, you're not actually very high in openness. It's that's just a simple question that sometimes gets asked.
High in openness. That's a very interesting way to phrase it too. It reminds me of the time that my mom got told by her boss at work that she had a high authenticity rating. She went, what the fuck do you mean?
But yes.
High authenticity rating.
So I don't think you're very open, 1 Wing 9. I expect my apology forthwith. But yeah, that's the only answer we got from ones. Also, I will say that our lowest rated episodes are the ones where we discuss type 1s. So maybe ones just don't like us. And actually, so one of my friends is a 1, and when I was telling her about how our episodes had ranked, and type 1, our episode on type 1 had the least amount of listens, she was like, how dare you? Ones have to be the best. And so she was like, I'm just gonna listen to it on repeat so it bumps up the numbers. And I was like, don't do that, you're gonna mess up our demographic, our numbers. She was like, this cannot stand. So if you are a 1 that actually likes us, thank you. But yeah, and sorry, I don't have any interesting 1 answers for you this time.
I'm seeing if my sister will respond. Hopefully we can get some more data here.
Mm-hmm.
Also asking my dad. Apparently all my family's in the competency triad, except for me and maybe my mom.
I'll while you're trying to get an answer from her, I'll move on to type 3s. Type 3s were much nicer to me and were much more enthusiastic about the answer. So type 3, and quote, 3 here, interesting question. Thank you, meow woof ribbit. I think you're interesting. So they basically say that they think they probably would survive for two reasons. One is that on a personal level, they have friends who have planned for this. Quote, I have friends who have actually planned for this. I roll. So I would just go with them. So they have friends who would be able to help them out. And then also, as far as Enneagram skills, they're good leaders. They're good at networking, so they could get in a best group for survival. They're competent. And they'd be able to like take charge and rally the troops. So thank you very much for that answer. My other three friend, pulling up her answer now, she says that, quote, I probably have something between a 50% and a 75% chance of survival. My ideal survival plan is with a group of no more than 4 people, probably. And she breaks it down a little bit more. Um, uh, I would inform myself and be cautious. I would be able to kill the zombies without too much guilt, and I'm fine being alone and moving at an odd pace. I'm fine with not eating, drinking, sleeping for long periods of time. So those are all the pros. And the hindrance is that she's not really the fittest right now. Um, she, um, uh, if she wanted to protect her family, well, she'd want to stay with her family and might end up sacrificing herself for them or like getting herself into a situation because of that. And quote, in a big group, I may sacrifice myself, not gonna lie. So she thinks she'd probably survive, but 50 to 75%. So the threes, you're probably gonna survive. Fives, it's pretty split. Um, so one said that they didn't think they would survive because they're pretty out of shape, and so um, they also don't really know many like practical like survival skills, so they think they'd die pretty soon. Um, this 1-5 is like I would go super alone and just be on my own and would sneak around that way, and so I probably wouldn't attract much attention, and so I think I would survive. And this is my favorite answer because as a 5-wing 4, I relate. Quote, if I did, it would be because I fought him off. And I love that because every time I get drunk, Caden can attest to this. I basically am like, I go out and do kind of semi-reckless things like walking alone at night in scary places and things like that. And my answer is always just, "What? I'll fight him off. I'll punch a bitch." So I feel that in my soul. Did you get any responses?
I'm polling the people that I know. I keep on thinking of new people that I know that actually fit in this. Hold on, I'm gonna have it be very rattly for a second. I'll let it get more.
Okay.
I might though. My friend who's a 5 answers yes. Just yes. She would survive. And you know what? I believe her.
I'm
She was an
torn.
athlete in college. She's very self-sufficient and self-reliant. And I do think that she would murder people to like keep living. In the zombie way, not like actual people thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like,
Oh yeah, I'd have no problem killing a zombie.
right.
Like none at all. I am torn because I'm not as in shape right now, but the reason we're pre-recording is about to have me like very in shape. So maybe at the end of these next 4 months. And also I have a fair amount of survival skills and tools for survival and like surviving alone. Which you'll find out more about. I'm also interested to see if, given these clues and these random clues that I'm giving, if anyone has guessed why I will be out of commission for the next couple of months. So if you do have a guess, email us or tweet us.
My dad has a response for us as well. Another 5. I hang out with a lot of 5s. His answer is just no. No other elaboration either. So I think we're sensing a trend. In how 5s respond.
5s are very short and sweet to the point, and it's either yes or no.
Uh-huh.
And if they do give some reasons, it tends to be for very practical, like, nah, I'm out of shape, I'd die. Or
Yeah, I think that's his. I mean, he's at this point in his 50s and is not totally out of shape, but is certainly past his prime in terms of roughing it.
I'm very interested to see what Selena says, because if it's also just like, what the fuck is this question? I'm just calling it. All ones hate the question.
Possible. We've also asked Alyssa's dad, who's the one. So
Oh,
we'll who knows if he'll get back, but he's probably up. You know, he gets up fairly early. Stupid ones working on the weekend. Their dedication to the cause.
don't they know we're recording a podcast and like need them?
Right? Don't they know I don't plan ahead and like do these things beforehand? So, what are the harmonics?
Yeah, I will go ahead and.
Why are we doing this episode? Why is it so important?
So, as you guys probably know, there are multiple different triads which divide the Enneagram into groups of 3, and the groups will share common characteristics in behavior. So we're starting with the harmonics, and the harmonics is really just how the types cope with conflict, disappointment, and my quote from one website is literally, Enneagram harmonic groups help show how each type copes with conflict and difficulties. Harmonic groups also show how we defend against disappointment, and that's pretty much as deep as it goes on what they are. So, in this triad, our 3 groups are competency, positive outlook, and reactive/emotional realness. You'll see it described in those 2 different ways. And so, why it's kind of important to maybe learn about this is that it can help you understand more about how you react in disappointment and how others can probably perceive you during times of conflicts and fights and problems. And it can also help you understand where other people are coming from in their conflict. So, if maybe someone you know is constantly irritating you during arguments or fighting, and then you realize, oh, it's because they're a positive outlook and I'm competency, and so I want to solve the issue and they're not really taking it seriously. Here's some ways I can go around that, and now I understand why they're doing what they're doing. So it's just good for life skills to have those. So this week we're starting with competency, which is type 1, 3, and type 5. Whoop whoop. It's me. So, let me see. The competency triad. These people, when faced with a dilemma or disappointment, try and go out and like fix it. They're very problem solving oriented. They're very like, stuff needs to happen now. I will feel whatever I'm feeling later. Let's come up with the solution now. Um, so, um, uh, quote, their way of being competent plays into their understanding of the world and what's important, just like the rest of us. Most of the time we will, let's see, I think I've just gone over it all, because it's just, quote, they remain cool and emotionally detached when confronted by a problem. Oh, and quote, these types have issues on working within a framework or structure. Do you
I
have
would
anything
like
to
to
add?
point out that their way of being competent plays into, and we'll get into this when we talk about how that
Mm-hmm.
shows up in each specific type, but it plays into their understanding of the world and like what's important within it. So
Mm-hmm.
the ways that 1, 3s, and 5s are going to define competency and approach competency will match generally their sort of like ego type and how they operate it throughout stuff.
Yep.
Oh, and on the unemotional stuff, they're trying to be unemotional, but the way that like integration and disintegration works, even if you are a harmonic that's a competency type, you might also be experiencing some disintegration due to stress,
Yeah.
which could have you tapping into your emotions. So, for example, if you're a 1 and you're in stress to 4, you're going to be highly emotional, but you're also going to be prioritizing competency. And that's where you get interesting interactions where trying to be unemotional can actually be feeding your emotional reaction to things or creating separate problems for you that you'll have to deal with later.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, so let's go ahead and move on into type ones and how they interact with the competency triad. And so ones kind of put their focus on being correct, being on the right side of the conflict, um, and doing what's right. So I have a couple quotes here. Type 1s put emphasis on being competent by being correct and sensible. They manage feelings by repressing and denying them instead of channeling their feelings into activity. Um, and ones want to follow the system and can get upset with those who do not. And I think that's very interesting because when I think of competency, I generally think of doing things. So it's interesting to see that the ones they put all their energy into repressing instead of into action, which I think goes into that you get like they disintegrate to that type 4 kind of
Yep.
place. Um, so some problems that they have is that or actually let's not do that. I have another quote here. So for Enneagram type quote, for Enneagram type 1, this looks like using logic to find the quote right answer. When they don't get what they want, they may try to figure out what went wrong and make it better. They generally adhere to the rules if, quote, if they believe those rules to be helpful and expect other people to do the same. When they do bend the rules, people rarely challenge them because they're known for rule following. So, and then some problems that can arise with the type 1s being in the competency triad is that ones can get into conflict by being too impatient and rigid and critical. I'm looking at you, type 1, that hurt my feelings.
Has a high openness.
You don't. You critical. Um, one's focus on solving problems by doing what's right. Yeah. Okay, we've already done that. But yeah. So they can just be kind of rigid. They want to do what is, quote, right. And that's also very interesting because ones are very set on their own moral integrity and it's their own base of moral. So it might not go along with what other people think is kind of a correct morality. Um, they might even just be bad people, but they're following their own moral code. It's a very lawful good. Like if you're in D&D, it's
Yeah.
a very lawful good kind of
Or
point
just
of view.
heavy on the law,
Yeah, so lawful
in general.
neutral or lawful
Um,
evil would
and
still be ones.
it's interesting to me because when people talk about like the system
Mm-hmm.
in general for ones, I think it's important to point out that the system does not always mean legality. It does not always mean socially acceptable. What it does mean is that ones have, and this is the D&D sense too, like where lawful isn't actually, um, it doesn't prescribe any sort of whether you're following the law or not. It really
Mm-hmm.
actually is only talking about do you have a code that you follow.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And ones are very bound to their own code.
Yeah. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
personalized thing, right? And you can't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily assume that you'll know how a 1 will react to a situation
Mm-hmm.
based on what society says, because it's all about them having their own idea about what is right and what is not right.
Mm-hmm. Both simultaneously the wild card and very much not the wild card.
Yeah.
Because if you're just talking about ones in general, it's like who would know? Because it's their own personal thing. But if you know a specific one, then you pretty much know how they're gonna react.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have anything else to add? I feel like you probably do because you have type 1 sister. Um,
I mean, I think where ones can get into a lot of trouble with difficulty in particular is more about difficult personal decisions,
Mhm.
is what I've seen, is that they
Yeah.
get caught up in making the right decision,
Mhm.
and really acknowledging that they tend to repress their emotions in conflict, try to get in touch with them, but then actually end up disintegrating because they're so focused on their emotional state at leading them
Mhm.
to the correct answer,
Mhm.
and they need to get out of their head. So another example, not like a one, but my partner is a seven, who that's a one connection there. Um, and we've been talking a lot about uh, getting a new apartment, or like our job situation in the future and stuff. And it does kind of take walking through. She was like, oh well, I don't want to choose this job for the wrong reasons, right?
Mhm.
I want to choose this job for the right reasons. And so there's this idea inherent in that like the paralysis of decision,
Mhm.
because you cannot make a wrong decision,
Mm.
um, is the danger of that competency, right? Because their competency is hinging on being correct.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting that you bring up the emotional side of it too, because so my dad is a type 1, and he's generally my emergency contact for things because just in a crisis, he's got a very cool head. However, when it comes to his own baggage, he
Hmm.
like he wanted to divorce my mom for years, but he considered that to be kind of like in a way abandoning his children. So he refused to do that until my brother graduated high school and kind of martyred himself. And it was definitely not his choice for what would be right was inaction. And it just wasn't a great choice overall because he was miserable and essentially kind of martyred himself. Um,
Yeah.
so,
But it seems like the correct and sensible thing to do, regardless of how he personally feels about it.
yep.
And
So
that's
he,
the thing, is where you're not taking your personal feelings into account as
mm-hmm,
part of the correct and sensible.
yeah. All right. That's all I've got on ones. Do you want to move on to threes?
Yep.
Um, so threes, they they almost take the moment to be like, look at me, look at how I shine. And okay, not in their own personal problems, but more like if you're at a workplace problem or something like that, because they put their emphasis on being competent, being efficient,
Producing
being the
results.
producing result, being the person that you can go to get problems solved. So I have some quotes here. Um, uh, they quote, they manage feelings by repressing and focusing on tasks. They also look to others for feeling cues. Threes want to work within the system, but also want to work on their own outside of the system. They have little patience for rules. And here's another quote. Quote, when faced with difficulty, an Enneagram 3 goes to work to solve the problem logically, bending the rules when the rules don't serve them. If they can just stay focused on fixing the issue, they won't have time to feel negative emotions. When they successfully find a solution, they can add it to their list of achievements and skip right over emotions brought on by the difficulty in the first place.
I feel some of this as a nine.
Hmm. I think it's very interesting, and I would like to hear from maybe threes who have, or actually anyone in this competency triad, with anxiety issues
Mm.
and diagnosed anxiety disorders. Because the only like I know threes, but the only one I'm close enough to have kind of seen this in their real life. Um, problems when problems would arise, they would always have a hard time because they felt the need to be perfect, they felt the need to rewrite, and they felt all this pressure that they were essentially putting on themselves, especially since they have a diagnosed anxiety disorder. And so I don't know how to remove that anxiety disorder from my analysis of threes in the competency
Mhm.
triad because I haven't really seen it work without that. Um, but I am interested to know threes. Do you have? issues with anxiety? Does that come up for you a lot? Maybe you don't have a diagnosed anxiety disorder, but does the pressure that you put on yourself, how does that affect you?
I'm interested in how the competency interacts with the personal narrative, you know?
Mhm.
Because for me, I look at this and I say, oh, it seems to me that threes have taken that competency and interwoven it so like intimately with their sense of identity as
Mhm.
like just as a type of like who you are as the achiever competency, right?
Mhm.
Um, that I wonder how that's different from the one and the five in the way that they interact with the, because you talked about, oh, I like to think of myself as competent, right?
Mhm.
But um,
See, I think for a 3, it has a much more of an emotional impact because
yeah,
they built their identity. For me, I'm competent out of survival and a need for survival, and it goes back to that
right.
fear center. Threes
It's
are competent because they want they have such a problem with self-worth,
that's how they
and
get love,
it's how they get love. Um, and so they have such an issue with feeling worthless and feeling
right?
incompetent
And for
that
once, the competency is more about being good than anything else. So you don't
mhm,
have to necessarily tie competency to being good, right?
mhm,
You can be good without being competent sometimes.
mhm,
Um, like if you're like, oh well, I'm good if I'm putting forth a good faith effort, then you just have to put forth a good faith effort. You don't have to succeed at things. But
yeah,
for threes, that's so interwoven with their fundamental type.
mhm. Let's see, some issues that can arise with the type 3. So, quote, type 3s can get into conflicts by being too competitive, insincere, and boastful. Threes focus, we've been over that. Okay.
Right. I
Think
think that threes
Gilderoy
can get into
Lockhart.
trouble. What?
Think Gilderoy Lockhart.
Yeah. Well, I think what happens is threes get into trouble when that sort of hyper focus on producing, on the production, on creating deliverables and goals
Mhm.
and meeting deadlines uh, blinds them to interfacing and interacting with the emotions of their team, you know?
Mm,
That's
yeah.
what I see as the biggest issue, right? Is if I am so go, 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 where I'm ignoring my own emotions, I also expect you to ignore your emotions for the good of the team, you know?
Yeah.
And instead of, and that's because they're heart center, right? And they're so divorced from the heart center.
Mhm.
Um, and that can lead to a lot of alienation where it actually hinders your productivity. And then you wonder why your productivity is suffering because you're not being a good team member. And it turns out that it's because you're being so self oriented.
Mm. Ready to move on to fives?
Yeah.
This is my type. Um, I really as a competency type, I really like associating with other competency centers. Just because I just kind of groove with the like, let's repress our emotions. Let's focus on the problem. Um, but yeah, so fives is kind of basically we focus on every problem is solvable. So if I can just figure it out, if I can think it through and like make a plan and then enact that plan and like let's just get this done. Um, and so here I have some quotes. Quote, Enneagram 5 prefers to face difficulty by completely removing their emotions from the equation and using their brain to solve the problem. If they're not already an expert on the matter at hand, they will learn all they can about it so they can be confident in their solutions. Fives typically do not like operating inside the structure of rules and gladly work outside those bounds to achieve the outcome they want. Type 5s put emphasis on being competent by being an expert and having information. They manage feelings by detaching and staying cerebral, and 5s reject the system and want to work on their own. They have little patience for rules.
I have an
Basically.
update on our ones for
Um,
the question.
mhm.
Um, Alyssa's dad has responded, "I hate zombies." To which C responded, "So is that a yes?" And there's been no confirmation after that. So uncertain. My sister has responded, "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe no. I don't have much interest in living in a zombie world. Sounds kind of shitty. I'd rather just die."
I'm sensing a like all of them just don't want to think about it.
Yeah, it's just like, ooh, that sounds bad.
It's very interesting too because our other question when we asked the body types, if they had to dislocate a body part or like could remove a body part or something, what would they remove? And all the ones were like, why? Fuck you. Like, no. They were all kind of mean that one too, but this one really got to me. I'm sensitive.
Okay. Back to fives. Back to
Back to
fives.
fives. So trying to think of like me and conflict. Actually, I don't even have to think about it that much because my two partner is in the positive outlook triad, and it can get very. Both of us trying to work on a problem is interesting. Um,
I think that's an interesting intersection there, though, too, right?
mhm,
Because for me, I'm also positive outlook, right? But
mhm,
my positive outlook often draws on like mid-level three tendencies of competency. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Where it's like the problem isn't that bad because it's very fixable. So let me just fix the problem and everything will be fine and there won't be any conflict,
Ah,
you know?
yeah.
So there are ways where your integration and disintegration can those
Mhm,
triad things can influence why. And fundamentally for me though, in the basis of the why, it's because I don't want there to be an issue. I
mhm.
don't actually want to be competent. That's just a like side whatever. But like I don't know. You integrate to
8.
8, which is the um
Assertive
assertive.
charge,
Yeah,
kind of. Mhm,
reactive,
mhm,
emotional realness
mhm.
one. Yeah.
Um, However, it doesn't. In repressing my emotions, I think when I integrate to kind of fix problems, people can find me aggressive because I do kind of integrate to 8. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, this is what we're doing. Do it.
You're using your emotions to
Mm,
fuel the
mhm.
competency.
Yeah.
And then when you disintegrate, you're going to 7, which is positive outlook, which is everything is fine. We're ignoring the problem, and this is how we're fixing it.
Yep. And that's yep. And I just run away. I run away from my problems. We didn't kind of look at that in threes. So the threes
Are going to
disintegrate,
disintegrate to positive outlook,
mhm, and are
which,
going to integrate to emotional reactivity.
yep. And then the ones are going to disintegrate to uh, emotional reactivity and integrate to positive outlook.
Hmm, very
So that makes
interesting.
them slightly different than the threes and the fives, who
Mhm.
have a similar pattern there.
Yeah. Yeah. I speaking from experience, when there is an issue as a 5, I cannot do anything else until the issue is resolved. Which that can cause issues with positive outlook people I've found.
Right. You know what I'm thinking about right now, though? With your little like
Mhm.
vignette about your dad
Mhm.
is that disintegration is an emotional reactivity response, though, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
framed as competency,
Mhm. Yep. And it very much was. It was tied to um because his parents divorced when he was very little,
right?
and like
And
he
the
bounced
positive
around.
outlook would be this is actually fixable. Like
Mhm.
me getting out of an unhappy situation is not going to destroy my relationship with my children.
Mhm.
It'll
Yeah.
make me a better person, and that will make me a better father, and that will mean that I get to preserve the relationship I have with my kids.
Mhm. Very interesting. Me working, going back to fives, working with positive outlook. I feel like that is where fives have probably some of the most issues because positive outlooks, especially if they're like there isn't a problem or they want to ignore the problem, I can't do that. Like that has been some of the like I remember one time KJ and I got into a small argument because um, they needed something printed off and the printer was broken and I went and fixed the printer and was kind of ignoring that they were like, oh, it's fine, we can print it off later. um, and so um, when I did print it off, they were like,
Hmm.
it was like that was, and it kind of brought me into like, oh, you know what? I mean, it probably didn't need to be printed off now, but I still couldn't let it go.
Yeah.
Have we ever been in conflict because of the competency positive outlook?
Yes. I think pretty much every single conflict we've ever been in has been a combination of competency, positive outlook. I've been ignoring the
Oh,
issue and you've been wanting to address it. And I go, you want me to talk about my feelings? Fuck no. And I run away.
okay, yep, you're right. I'm thinking about every fight we've ever.
Every single fight we have literally ever had in our 3 years of friendship has been that interaction right there.
I kind of, I
Did
hadn't
you
even.
block out all of that?
It's not that I blocked it out because I remember the fights, but I had blocked out exactly why they were happening,
Uh,
and yeah.
it was, I don't want to address the issue. And you being like, this is an issue. And me going, I don't want to address it.
So that's I think that's all I've got, except moving on to advice for the types.
I'll leave this up to you as someone with experience being in competency.
So my advice is that emotions are necessary. Make sure you are addressing your own and others. Be respectful of others' emotional needs.
Good advice.
Mhm.
My advice to ones is be less mean to Maddie.
Yeah, I'm sensitive. uh,
So we will be continuing to pre-record some episodes in the future, but be sure to send us an answer to our question of the month regardless. We'll look them over. We can include it in later discussions, and we love to hear from all of you. So um, what is the funniest thing you've done to avoid stress? And this is a call out for like me specifically, but also all of my fellow um, 9 to 7, because that's the next harmonic triad we're going to be going over. So send us a tweet at EnneathingGoes, email us EnneathingGoes@gmail.com, leave us a comment, a review, let us know how you're doing in these times that we're living in.
don't tweet us if it's gonna be mean.
Don't tweet us if you're a mean one.
Bye.
Bye.